heading up to 79th Street, and I can't help but give a pass by to the late great Parc Lincoln Hotel. It says Hotel Lincoln Square down the side, but that is its previous name. I lived there in 1990 and 1991. It was first place I ever had in New York. I think it was room 1422, and then room 317. Today the place is called the Amsterdam, Amstrdm, which they renamed, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, maybe even longer. And the renaming was supposed to be in anticipation of the place being renovated and turned into something respectable. They even got some celebrities to move in. I remember Cynthia Nixon was said to have had a place there for a little while. But really, you can't put lipstick on this pig. It was a dump when I was there. It's a dump still, by every estimate that I've heard. I think those two windows with the shades drawn, underneath the two windows with the one air conditioner on the right, I believe that to be room 1422. That was the first place I ever had to myself in New York. If that's not it, well, it's close enough. It's a pretty good view from up there. I didn't really appreciate it at the time. Freddie and Pepper's Pizza is still there. That's amazing. All these years. That was the best pizza around. These are on Amsterdam, just up from 74th Street. I can be certain that I never used these phones back in the early 90s because they wouldn't have been here. This style of enclosure with the semi-arched roof and everything, these didn't show up on the streets until the mid-90s.
Oh, really? That's so funny. I don't like corn on my taco.
No, but this is a corn,
Like plain corn with no butter.
I swear that woman just said, I don't like porn on my tacos. I think she probably said corn. I love porn on my tacos, if you don't mind me saying it. If that's not TMI. These are outside the back entrance of the Beacon Theater, which is where the Allman Brothers used to do their annual string of concerts. I did actually go to that once. I was about to say I never saw them at the Beacon because they started doing those concerts at somewhere up in Washington Heights. I don't see any signage here, but this is the back entrance of the Beacon. I did end up seeing them. I remember I was impressed because they didn't do even the most cursory security check for anybody going in there. And everybody was smoking pot inside. It felt like a concert would have felt back in the 70s, which is how they wanted it. I don't let memories of this place torment me like I used to. But it really was just a horrible, horrible place when I was there. There'd be cockroaches crawling into your mouth in the middle of the night and pigeons just barging into your window. But it was cheap. Room 317 cost me $90 a month. $90 a week. I had to share a bathroom down the hall where there was a sign over the sink that said, "Please do not urinate into the sink." Like, why would anybody do that if there's a toilet right there? Must have been some reason. But a lot of very colorful memories. The opera singer lived next door to me. He seemed to rehearse 24 hours a day. And he was a horrible, horrible singer. He sounded like a pig in heat. He was like the worst opera singer that ever lived. And across the hall was a dude with emphysema. He was coughing up a gut 24 hours a day. A couple of doors over was this woman who never stopped mumbling. And I made a cassette recording of her as I moved out, but I lost it. I wish I could hear that again. She was actually kind of comforting. And the lobby had the historic, to me, set of phone booths where I first called the apology line. And one night I was in there, I discovered that after a certain hour, you put in a quarter or whatever it cost back then, and the call would never disconnect. And so I'd be standing in there for like an hour listening to apology calls. And one of the dudes who sort of loitered in the lobby of the Parc Lincoln took this as a clue that I was looking for some action, so he tried to horn his way in to the phone booth with me. Slightly terrifying experience at my young, naive age. But the lobby got gutted out and replaced with this place called Cheska. I had dinner there back in, I don't know, it's probably been about 10 years now. It's a fancy, nice place. I would recommend it. I guess it wasn't too expensive, if I remember right. Yoko Ono is said to make this her regular restaurant in the area. She lives over in the Dakota. But as I was in that fancy place, being served seemingly unlimited fare, I just looked up at the ceiling and asked, who are the people living right upstairs from this? Are they living in the same squalor that I did as I'm sitting here eating expensive seafood and fine wine? Are these people like laid out flat on the floor, drug-addled? How much of a distance is there between us? In the early 90s, I honestly don't remember what the outdoor payphone population was, but I do remember making calls to my mother from some phones over on Broadway. This is on Amsterdam near, just up from 77th. One of the oddest bits of kismet that I experienced with regard to the Parc Lincoln came sometime probably 12 years ago. I was rehearsal pianist for an opera singer who I really wish I'd stay connected with, by the way, because he was really, really good. But he was asking me if I could make it to a coaching session with one of his vocal instructors. I said, yeah, sure. Where is it? He said, I think it's 151 West 57th Street. I said, can you repeat that? It turned out that this opera coach's studio was directly across the street from the Parc Lincoln. And next thing you know, I found myself in a, I think, 5th or 6th floor apartment, looking right at the Parc Lincoln. And all these memories flash back, and I asked the instructor if he knew anything about the place. He's like, oh man, that place is notorious. All kinds of crazy shit goes down in there. There's murders, there's gunshots coming out of there. And I was like, well, I guess some things never change. But the building that dude lived in was the source of one of my earliest vivid memories of New York. Was my very first day actually was sometime in October, I guess, or it must have been November 1990. And I stepped out of the Parc Lincoln, looked across the street, saw this dude standing there, and he just dropped his pants and took a shit, splat onto the sidewalk, just like, and then he pulled his pants back up and just went about his way. Welcome to New York, right? It's about as much, I don't know, I feel like I got just the tail end of 1980s New York, which depends who you ask, but a lot of people say that was the best New York. Because it was so, people talk about it today, people who didn't live through it talk about it today like it was the wilding, like there was just chaos and lawlessness, and it just wasn't really like that. It was very comfortable. When muggers threatened you, said they were going to cut out your tongue if you didn't hand over all your money. Anybody getting mugged like that knew they weren't going to get their tongues cut out. It was just kind of a street theater. These are on Broadway near 81st. Looks like somebody tried to use one of them. I got an interesting message last night from somebody in, I believe, Pennsylvania. He messaged me through the Facebook Payphone project page. I don't hate Facebook per se, but I really do hate publishing anything through their pages. I think I posted something last night for the first time in months. I just can't stand the interface. But he seemed interesting. He asked if it would be okay if he asked me some questions about some of my payphone radio calls. And I said, sure. Just, if it's no problem, just maybe give me a couple of sentences about who you are. I gave him my email address, telling him I can't stand messaging through Facebook. And he said that I'd be hearing from him soon. I am rather proud of my little payphone radio project, if I'm allowed to say that. There were a few days where it was the number one station at radio.garden. So I was maxed out on listeners for a few days. And all I could think was, is this stuff really supposed to be popular? It just didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right that payphone radio would ever be popular. And it only briefly was, as a curiosity. That's kind of the way the internet works. Infatuated with the new.
Trade is like the number one coffee. I can always taste it.
I looked up and saw this and was a bit frightened in the moment because I thought this was a live creature of some sort. I think I forgot to say I'm up here again meeting up with a friend that came with me when I did the Manhattan Valley payphone tour. Was that last week or was it 2 weeks ago? I still have no concept of what day of the week it is, what time it is, anything. Maybe I never did, but pandemic certainly exacerbated that that little dynamic. This stretch of the west side does have a lot of phones remaining. I noticed that another time I was up here. Took a bus up to 101st Street. But this friend seems to enjoy the payphone thing as much as I do. And we always seem to have a good time. This is another one at Broadway and 81st Street, other side. There's another of those drop all charges for every protester stickers, or 2 of them. Oops.
Okay. 10 little speckles for us. 7 little speckles for us. Well, eating the most.
Let's see, what are people drinking on the west side? Modelo. God damn. How anybody can drink that shit? So wouldn't you know that I'm back at 106th Street and Amsterdam Avenue exactly a week later, I think, where I spotted 3 payphone enclosures in a row with only 2 phones intact, but neither of them worked, of course. And here, 1 week later, exactly 1 week later, they are gone. What I find interesting and remarkable about this particular removal is that they have not been replaced with Link NYC. I mean, they haven't been replaced with the yellow mats that you see on the site of so many other payphone removals. The yellow mats are supposed to indicate that a Link NYC kiosk is coming to this spot where the payphone used to be. But I've suspected since about 2 years ago, long before the pandemic, that Link NYC, the whole program, had just stagnated. There hadn't been a single new installation in, I don't think, probably over 3 years now. So what is to become of the great smart city free Wi-Fi for everybody program that got so much love and attention in its early iterations? But that's amazing. I got them just in time. Similar thing happened down in Chinatown earlier this year. I documented a whole bunch of really graffiti spewed phones, and they were gone within a week. So if you blink and you'll miss it. But these suckers are gone, and they're never coming back. And it remains to be seen if anything ever replaces these old things.